Hi everyone, how you guys doing? Welcome to my very first episode of Real Adventures, a random movie podcast. My name is Matt Jarbo, and let me tell you what this podcast is, what to expect from these particular recordings, and why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. So, I am a lifelong fan of movies. I have spent a lot of my life working around them, mostly in regards to movie theaters, but also Hollywood video. And I did work in LA for a couple of years trying to make my way in the film industry. So, like those of us who have largely failed in that dream, we still love and are passionate about movies. And so ultimately, we want to talk about them. We want to talk about things that we love. But the way that I view movies is that it's kind of like an adventure. Your viewing habits, your experience watching movies is unique to you. It's a very interesting, engaging, and enthralling adventure. It really is. If you think about it, like from going from one movie to another, it's kind of cool, right? Like just how you have maybe found yourself going down this journey of watching movies. And so, what I decided to do is I decided that I wanted to just kind of have a little discussion for 10 movies at a time that I have seen. So you can call this a listicle, you can call this 10 movies, whatever it is. But what you have to understand is that it is an adventure. There's no rhyme, there's no reason, there's no set outcome. I have cataloged thousands of movies that I have seen, and then I'm using ChatGPT to help me pick 10 at a time randomly to discuss. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I feel like it would be great to just kind of go through a list of movies, talk about them, and then to see whether or not you guys have seen them, what your thoughts are on it, and everything like that. Because it is a very communal experience watching movies. It's an adventure, but it's one that brings us all together. And this first batch of films, again, entirely chosen at random, I think is a great one to start off with. And so, look, if you enjoy this kind of podcast, if you enjoy this kind of list, if you enjoy just kind of remembering movies that you haven't seen since you were a kid, or realizing that, oh my God, you've seen thousands of movies like I have, maybe we're going to have some that we cross over. Maybe we're not going to have any that we cross over, but maybe you're just going to have a little bit of fun. And at the end of the day, if I can bring a smidge of positivity to your life in regards to how movies are discussed, or your thoughts on them, or your feelings about them, or your memories and what those might, recall back to, then I think I'm doing my job. And I think that's one of the reasons why I want to go on this real adventure with you guys and kind of go into my own past and talk about these particular films. So let's just dive into it. Number one is Lethal Weapon 3. Now, Lethal Weapon 3 is, in my opinion, not as good as Lethal Weapon 1 or Lethal Weapon 2. It's very difficult to top those two excellent movies, but it does kind of set the stage for what could almost be argued as a more comedic take on it. Like the first two movies are a bit darker. This one is definitely not as dark. And it does introduce us to Rene Russo's character, who obviously plays over into Lethal Weapon 4. And we get a nice, there's some really good action in the movie. The movie's a lot of fun to watch. For those of you who don't remember what this one is, Riggs and Murtaugh pursue a former LAPD officer selling confiscated weapons to street gangs. It's a simple enough early 90s type of movie. Came out 1992, did about $327 million worldwide, which back in the early 90s, that was definitely like really good. However, the critics and the audience maybe weren't like the most enthralled with it because they only gave it a 59% for Rotten Tomatoes and the audience score is a 51%. So it's middle of the road. Like I said, you watch this movie, you're not necessarily like getting what you're going to be getting out of the previous two, but it's still a fun entry. All the movies are great. All the Lethal Weapon movies are great. Not that they like invented the buddy cop dynamic, but it kind of perfected the buddy cop dynamic. And I feel like almost every other buddy cop movie ever since then has really been trying to just capture the Lethal Weapon motif. You could almost make the argument that like it just set the tone so well that everyone has just been trying to imitate what Richard Donner did back in, what was it, 1987 when the first one came out? But obviously, Lethal Weapon 4 in 1998, not as good. But hey, Jet Li's first American movie, still a fun one. This one also, by the way, introduced us as, to Joe Pesci's Leo Gets. Whatever Leo wants, Leo gets, which is still, all these years later, a pretty good, timeless classic in regards to the kind of commentary that, the quoting and everything else. If you remember anything about Lethal Weapon 3, you remember Joe Pesci. You really do. The other one that I feel almost surpasses the ones that came before it, another third film in the franchise, is 1993's Army of Darkness. Now, look, that's a bold, very bold claim to make. Because how do you top Evil Dead? How do you top the mother of all sequels, Evil Dead 2? That's a direct quote, by the way, from Bruce Campbell on the box, the VHS box, probably even the DVD of Evil Dead 2. It is a great movie. I saw a double feature a couple years back of Evil Dead and Army of Darkness at a drive-in not too far away from me here in Shelton, Washington. And I spent years working at a drive-in. I worked at one in San Diego, the Santee Drive-In, for like 12 years. And so it's gone now, which is unfortunate. A lot of the movies I'm going to be talking about when we get into like the early 2000s are all going to be talking about movies I saw at the drive-in. It means a lot to me. It's my home away from home, to be fair. But Army of Darkness is one that I saw when I was a kid. I saw all the Evil Dead movies backwards. So I saw Bruce Campbell in a movie called Army of Darkness. I saw the poster for it. I saw the trailer for it. I didn't see the movie in theaters because I was like, 10, 11, somewhere in there. But when I was able to go to Blockbuster and rent this movie and take it home, I was completely confused at the opening of the movie because it felt like there was some stuff that came before it, right? Obviously giving us a recap of Evil Dead 2. Well, I mean, Evil Dead 2 is a remake of Evil Dead 1, so obviously there's that. But what was interesting was like, I just fell in love with this movie, right? All the quotes. This is my boomstick. You ain't got nothing but Jack and shit, and Jack left town. Or of course, the like, I like, what is it? Like the, good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun, which by the way, I just have to point this out. I think it's the unrated, the screwball edition of Army of Darkness, which alters that line. So when he's battling Evil Ash, and Evil Ash is all like, you're good, Ash. I'm bad, Ash. You're good, Ash. I'm bad, Ash. Little goody two shoes. When he's doing that, and Ash shoots him, like the line that they actually put into the movie is, I ain't that good. Like, what the hell is that? That's not a Bruce Campbellism. You know what I mean? Like that's not a Bruce Campbellism. That's not one of the Bruce Campbellisms that you know and you love. It felt like cynical. Whereas the good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun is just such a better, snappier, awesomer line. And of course, I mean, the movie is just classic in my opinion. I'll tell you guys this. So I got Army of Darkness, saw it on VHS. Numerous years later, I was at the store. I came across Evil Dead 2. Realized that it was a prequel to Army of Darkness. I bought it for $7 on VHS. Went home, I watched it, absolutely loved it. It wasn't until I want to say like the end of the year 2000 that I actually, at the 20th anniversary of Evil Dead, I got a copy of it on VHS. I'd won in a contest online. And I finally sat down and watched Evil Dead. And it's remarkably grotesque and disturbing and amazing. And I was a little off-put by it because it's not Army of Darkness. It's not Evil Dead 2. The camp wasn't there. And I wasn't expecting that. But of course, I'll talk more about that at a later date. But still, Army of Darkness, classic movie. I recently got it last year on 4K. Thank you to Vince for sending me a copy of that. Obviously, we know the plotline of this movie. Ash Williams is transported to medieval times and must retrieve the Necronomicon to return home, battling the army of the dead when he mispronounces Klaatu Varata Nikto and ends up screwing the whole thing over. Also, shop smart, shop as smart. One of the best lines ever. However, the movie didn't really do that well worldwide. It only did $21.5 million against not the biggest budget, only $11 million budget. So, I mean, it doubled its production budget. And I'm sure at the time, because of how profitable home videos were, the movie ultimately ended up doing pretty well, I would assume. Audiences and critics liked it. Critics gave it 73%. Audiences have given it 87%. It is a timeless classic, one of Bruce Campbell's best performances ever, and really just kind of solidified him as being very much a comedic, very physically comedic actor, and one that you just got to love. Now, moving on, here's a sci-fi movie that I haven't seen in like the longest time, but I remember really liking it because I think this is what led to Keanu becoming Neo in the Matrix. And I'm talking about Johnny Mnemonic, right? A movie that almost feels to some extent like it's very much tied in to like where we are now, like where people want us to be, where like, here's the synopsis. If you've forgotten what Johnny Mnemonic is all about. In a dystopian future, a data courier with a storage device in his head must deliver vital information while evading assassins. Dolph Lundgren's in it. Dina Meyer is in it. This is before Starship Troopers. It's a weird movie. And it's one that I remember liking because it's Keanu Reeves, obviously, Bill and Ted, Speed, Point Break, all that stuff. And then you have to just kind of chuckle at it because it's just such a weird premise. And I do think that the movie only did $52 million worldwide. Audiences and critics, not the biggest fans, only did 19%, critically speaking, 31% with the audience score. I mean, that's not great, to be honest with you. But it is a movie that I think solidified itself in just like a really interesting mid-90s place. Because like visual effects weren't all the way there yet. Sure, we had Jurassic Park a couple years prior, and that kind of like changed the game. All things considered, it did. It really did change the game. But really here, it's like, like Virtuosity, Lawnmower Man, things along those lines. It's just movies that kind of had this weird over CG. I know Johnny Mnemonic didn't really have that, but it kind of feels to me like it belongs in like a Max Headroom type universe. Although it has been a long time since I've seen it, and I do need to give it another watch because, hey, who doesn't love watching a good schlocky Keanu movie, right? I mean, anyone here ever see The Day the Earth Stood Still? Yeah, right? Yeah, that was a thing. That was a movie. But going from mediocre follow-up to big hit to great follow-up to big hit, Happy Gilmore from 1996. Now, obviously, this is a movie that is getting a sequel right now. I believe Netflix is going to be developing it with Adam Sandler. He's got his Happy Madison Productions, which has done quite well for themselves with not only Sony Pictures, where they have an overall deal, but with Netflix being the one that foot the bill for a lot of this kind of stuff. And Adam Sandler is just really popular. People like Adam Sandler. Fun fact, back in 2015, on my old channel, I made a video around the time Pixels came out. And I was like, here's why I love Adam Sandler movies. Because I do. I love Adam Sandler movies. I lost 300 YouTube subscribers in one day. And still, to this day, 9 years later, catch an absolute amount of shit over it. People just give me crap for liking Adam Sandler. I think what it is because they're upset with me because I say that I like Adam Sandler. And I mean that I like Adam Sandler movies. It's not like I'm out there trying to argue anything that isn't, I'm not just doing it for clout. Right? Look, even That's My Boy is a funny ass movie, but that's later Sandler. Happy Gilmore, outside of Kingsman: The Secret Service, has one of the best uses of Freebird, because the song Freebird, for the opening credits of Happy Gilmore, It's slow, it's melodic. It kind of shows you this world that he grew up in, right? Whereas in Kingsman the Secret Service, it's used like the upbeat part of it for an action sequence. So it's weird how that kind of plays out. Also, it just goes to show you that Leonard Skinner is and always will be the shit, despite their questionable past with certain flags, I guess. But when you've got a story about a failed hockey player that turns to golf to save his grandmother's home, discovering that he's got a natural talent for it, and of course brings the hockey hooligan attitude to, to a tournament, going up against Shooter McGavin, played wonderfully by Christopher McDonald, who I do probably think will be in Happy Gilmore too. Sadly, rest in peace, Carl Weathers, having just passed away a few months ago, so we won't get the ghost of Chubbs. But what I hope is that we do get the sweetness, right? I mean, look, in Happy Gilmore, you had Ben Stiller having this great cameo as the orderly from the home the grandma goes to. I mean, like, I hope he comes back. You will shut up or I will shut you up is still a classic line. And then you've got like Bob Barker, who sadly passed away. There was Jaws, the Richard Keel, I think his name was. He sadly passed away. I mean, like there are people who have died who are in the original movie. I'm sure even the grandmother from the original movie has passed away. So it then becomes this whole idea of like, what are they going to do with it? I don't quite know, but Happy Gilmore itself exists in this magical mid-90s bubble for Adam Sandler. Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, Bulletproof. I mean, there were some really good movies that he did back then. And that really kind of pulled him out of the Saturday Night Live ensemble and really shined a light on him. And this is arguably one of my favorites. I mean, although, to be fair, at the time, critics were maybe a little bit harsh. They gave it a 61%. Audiences, on the other hand, were like 85%. This thing's awesome. And it did gross $41.2 million worldwide, which for a golf comedy in the middle of the 90s, even with Adam Sandler, is still a pretty decent amount of money. Moving over to talk about a movie that you just kind of had to be there at the time to really kind of get it is Suburban Commando from 1991. Now, if you've never heard of this movie, no one will blame you. Not a single person will blame you for it. Not a single person will question you on it. I've seen this movie quite a number of times. This is Hulk Hogan acting as what is it? I want to make sure I get this right. An interstellar hero lands on Earth and must adapt to suburban life while protecting a family from space criminals. Now, this is definitely not one that I saw in theaters. It came out when I was only 9 years old. It did not do well. It had a budget of $11 million. It only grossed $8 million. And it was really, really, really not well received. 15% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes based on only 13 reviews as of this. However, Roger Ebert did make this claim, saying this is the second feature starring Hulk Hogan, the man who looks like a comic strip hero. Hogan's range is limited, but not as limited as the movies he's appeared in. Despite the fact that his public image is often aimed at children, there's a whole line of Hulk Hogan toys. His first film, No Holds Barred, was surprisingly violent, sexist, and blood-soaked. Now here's Suburban Commando, which is at least innocuous, but gives the Hulkster so little to do that his fans may wonder why he bothered. Which is pretty mean. But look, the movie also has Christopher Lloyd, Shelley Duvall, Larry Miller. I mean, like, it's got a real young Elizabeth Moss is in the movie too. Also, one of my favorite actors, character actors from the 90s. You may remember a guy by the name of Tony Longo. He was in he did a bunch of shows like Renegade, Facts of Life, Family Matters. He was in Mulholland Drive, 16 Candles, The Last Boy Scout, Angels in the Outfield. He was in Flintstones, Viva Rock Vegas. I mean, the guy was like all over the place, right? And he was always kind of like a dumb meathead kind of guy. Sadly, he passed away June 21st, 2015 at the age of 53 from congestive heart failure. And not that I want to dwell on that, but like, again, like I've always enjoyed his work. He added a lot to this movie, just kind of being dumb, goofy, things like that. This movie, like, I remember it being like a lot of fun, even though Roger Ebert is like trashing this film to a 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid seeing Hulk Hogan in a movie with Christopher Lloyd, the Doc, right? Doc Brown. It was awesome. I've watched this movie multiple times. It's definitely not as bad as critics make it out to be. But, the other movie, moving on here, this one is one that I feel like is kind of in a weird space. And that, of course, is the 1992 adaptation of The Lawnmower Man, who I forget the original name of the movie. But here you've got Pierce Brosnan, Jeff Fahey, and it's kind of like, it's a thriller, right? It's a horror movie about a simple man who ends up getting experimented on, experimental pills and computer simulated training sequences in hopes of augmenting the man's intelligence. Now, if that isn't more in line with where we are today, right? And I mean, like, where we are today in regards to artificial intelligence and everything else. I mean, it's definitely a movie, like it's Job, the Lawnmower Man. It's crazy. Now, this one was directed by Brett Leonard, who also did Virtuosity. And that's another interesting movie. If you've ever seen Virtuosity, I mean, that will definitely pop up in this list because, like, I've seen it. So, like, it's a good movie for what it was. Denzel, Russell Crowe. But this one is like, I don't remember if this one is more of an erotic thriller. It's not really erotic. It kind of, to me, feels like it's a bit maybe like sexier than it is. But then again, I would have seen this movie when I was like 10, 11, or 12, somewhere in there. I mean, obviously, I think I would have watched it because of, Pierce Brosnan, right? Like, I probably would have seen it because of him. But it's got, Jenny Wright, as well as Jeffrey Lewis. You would know him from a lot of like quirky character roles. He's definitely a character actor, been in more than 200 films. This movie's kind of weird. This movie is kind of weird. It had a $10 million budget, but it did go on to do $150 million. And that's an early 1990s money, And so, but it didn't necessarily do well with critics. They kind of bashed it. They kind of were like, yeah, ain't that great. Like, what do we say here? It has a 37% Rotten Tomatoes based on 41 reviews, saying that it suffers from a predictable, melodramatic script and its once groundbreaking visual effects look dated today. Well, yeah, no shit. No shit. When you've got a movie that comes out in the early 90s and it has early CG, obviously it's going to be dated quite quickly. But for some reason, that's the thing. I don't know, guys. I try to I try with some of these people, but these critics are like, oh, it's completely dated. Yeah. No, duh, dated. But it is a movie that I think is worth watching. It's interesting to see early Stephen King movie. Like, I don't say early Stephen King adaptations, but it kind of feels like it. This was around the time of like a lot of the Stephen King, like Sleepwalkers, and you had like the miniseries of It. You had The Shining had come out in the 80s, obviously. There was like Carrie in the 80s. There's a bunch of other things. I think was still Silver Bullet. Was that him? I know Cujo was I think early 90s. Or am I thinking of Man's Best Friend? I know that was Ali Sheedy. Cujo might have been the 80s. But it's like, it felt like it was like, kind of coming into like the new age of things with Stephen King. And, some people like it, some people don't. But then we get all those lovely made-for-TV adaptations, right? The Shining. The Stand. Actually, no, The Stand is boss. Let's be fair. The Stand, it stands on its own. It's great. I think you guys would probably, if you haven't seen it, check it out, obviously. But we also do get some movies that are kind of worth talking about here. Let me kind of preface it by saying this. Caddyshack is the greatest golf movie ever made. Caddyshack 2 is the worst golf movie ever made. Major League is one of the best baseball comedies ever made. Major League 2 is not. It's not a bad movie. if you, it's worth watching. Okay. Like it's a sequel to the 1989 film. The problem though with this movie is that it doesn't have Wesley Snipes as Willie Mays Hayes. Okay. And then, but they did replace him with Omar Epps, and nothing against Omar Epps. However, it's just like, it wasn't as good. The first movie was like raunchy, R-rated, fun, things like that. This one, not so much. In fact, the general plot line of this one is that the Cleveland Indians face new challenges as they try to win the division title again. I mean, that's basically about it. Right? They're just trying to kind of redo the same thing. And they are, having their own problems. It's a look, the original movie made a lot of money and a lot of people really, really, really liked it. What did the original do here? Let me double check. So the original had an $11 million budget, made $75 million. So that's a really good return. This one had a budget of $25 million and only pulled in $53 million. So it's like, look, it still probably made money at the end of the day, but it was PG-13, not rated R. They removed a lot of the raunchy humor and it just didn't work out very well. It just did not work out very well, even though it was written, directed by David S. Ward, who wrote the original, but this time around they got R.J. Stewart to write it, and yeah, maybe that was the problem. This was a Warner Brothers movie, so, I guess, like, take that for what you will. Look, if you've ever seen Major League 2 and you like it, I would like to hear your thoughts on it. It's been a while, but the first one is so damn iconic. It's like, how do you live up to such greatness? That's always a question. It is. Like, how do you do that? The same can be said for this next movie, because this next movie spawned not only multiple television sequels, multiple television shows, it has a devoted fan base who wants more and more and more and more, and yet they've never really gotten it. And I'm talking about 1994's Stargate. Now, this came from Roland Emmerich, who you may know from movies like Independence Day, The Day the Earth Stood Still, 2012. I mean, this guy has done disaster porn like you wouldn't believe. In fact, his first real big movie, he did a couple before doing Stargate, but what put him on the map was he directed 1992's Universal Soldier, which is excellent. We'll talk about that at some point in time. But he's gone on to do quite a bit. I mean, his last movie was Moonfall. Take that for what you will, right? You know what I mean? Just saying. Moonfall was an interesting one. But Stargate is a classic. It's just an absolute classic. It's a device found in Egypt in the 30s. In the 1990s, they're able to activate it. It turns into a portal that takes them to another world across the galaxy. And then you find out that, like, humans came from them, essentially. And it's a great movie. James Spader, Kurt Russell, hell, even French Stewart, who at the time was getting ready to blow up on Third Rock from the Sun. But it was so good. It was such a damn good movie. And it just put I don't want to say it put Kurt Russell on the map, but it did kind of do a bit for James Spader, I think. I know he was part of the Brat Pack, I think. So like it kind of, solidified him as a good science fiction guy. Not to say that they did anything with it after. I mean, well, Kurt Russell went on to go do like other things like Soldier a couple years later, which is effectively like a pseudo sequel to Blade Runner. That's a whole other topic. But Stargate is a classic. It's an absolute freaking classic. And the movie did have a $55 million budget, and it pulled in 4 times that amount, almost, with $196.6 million. And look, to be fair, it probably did quite well on home video. And I mean this, it probably did very, very well on home video. This was actually the very first DVD I ever bought. And it was a double-sided DVD. The first half of the movie was on one half. I had to flip the disc to get the other half of the movie. And back when I bought it, this is when like DVDs were first kind of rolling out. So like I spent a premium to buy this movie to just have to pop it out halfway through and flip the damn disc. It just goes to show you like how how time has really, really moved. Now, the movie itself did quite well critically. Well, okay, sorry, I was wrong here. 54% with an average rating of 5.4. Okay, fine, whatever. I was wrong. I misread that. But listen. Okay, like even Cinema Score gave the film a B plus. I feel like at the time it was just like it was so different. It was so radically different that it just made it this whole notion of like people just didn't get it. I don't think it would hold that rating now. You know what I mean? I just do not believe it would have that rating now. Because you've got so much has come out of that. So many people love Stargate. So many people out there, they want more from the shows. Amazon now owns the rights under MGM. They're doing nothing with it. It's like, come on, guys, this is just like easy money. It is what it is, unfortunately. But moving on to our second to last movie of this adventure is one that I think really does take the cake as being one of the best spoofs of all time. Now, look, Mel Brooks is Mel Brooks. You're never going to really top Mel Brooks, but Jim Abrams did an amazing job directing Hot Shots. This is a parody movie of Top Gun, along with a lot of other movies like 9.5 Weeks, The Fabulous Baker Boys, Dances with Wolves, Marathon Man, Rocky, Superman, and even Gone with the Wind. It stars Charlie Sheen before he went crazy. It's got Carrie Elwes, John Cryer, Kevin Dunn, Bill Irwin, Lloyd Bridges, may he rest in peace. And of course, Valeria Golino. Now, the thing with her that I enjoyed about this is like Ramada Thompson is her name. Obviously, Ramada the hotel. But she pops up again in Hot Shots Part 2, and they keep that story going on while spoofing other movies. And I actually kind of thought that was really cool that they were able to kind of like carry that romance. It gave it like a thematic through line, like a real thematic through line between both movies. And I feel like that's probably the best thing about this in many ways. I think it's a hysterical movie, but it didn't really do well when it came out July 31st, 1991. Because it had a budget of $26 million and it only grossed. Oh no, sorry, I was wrong. I'm reading this wrong. My bad. It did quite well. $26 million budget, $181.1 million. I was reading that as 18.1. I think I need new glasses. So it did quite well. And of course, Hot Shots Part 2 also did quite well. And who doesn't love those movies? I'm kind of glad they never did a third one, to be fair. The scary movies that were, I think, like really kind of taking on the spoof genre, they kind of ran that into the ground. And considering the fact that even Mel Brooks's like last movie wasn't necessarily like the Dracula Dead Loving, it didn't really like blow anyone's, skirts up or whatever. So you've got all that. But now when we get into the final movie of the day, this is all randomly chosen. So it's not like I'm like doing it, on my own. But the 1994 action comedy movie True Lies is a movie that I will unequivocally adore until the day I die. This movie is not only peak James Cameron, in my opinion. In many ways, it's not like science fiction James Cameron, like, Terminator 2, The Abyss, obviously Avatar 2. But you think about True Lies, it's in this weird bubble. It's a straightforward take on covert spy operations, right? Not gentleman spy, not James Bond, but just your American CIA operative working for, a different kind of clandestine like agency that operates under their own, rules, right? Because this, by the way, if you don't recall, the company, the agency that Harry Trasker works for is the Omega Sector, a top secret U.S. counterterrorism agency. And his partner is Tom Arnold. I really, really, really got bummed that I couldn't see this movie when it came out. Reason why is because I was 12. And I remember the summer this movie came out because it released on July 15th, 1994. And so I'm a big Arnold fan, right? Kindergarten Cop, Conan, Red Sonja, for crying out loud. I mean, Arnold is Arnold is Arnold. We know it's Arnold. Junior, twins, right? Red Dawn, Commando. The list goes on and on and on and on and on, right? It's Arnold. And so, Total Recall, fuck, dude. Anyway, it's Arnold. It's Arnold. So when this movie came out, I was only 12. It's rated R. Okay. My mom didn't want to take me to go see it. But I'm like, I've watched like everything else he's done, right? So like, what's going on? She just didn't want to take me to go see it. It's like, you're too young. It's too much. So we were getting ready to go camping at the end of the summer, like we always did. We went down to the Oregon coast for the weekend or for the week, and we're out doing shopping. And as we're at the store, we're walking around, we go through the magazine and book section, and I come across the novelization of the movie. Right. And so in my little 12-year-old brain, a scheme starts to be planted or starts to happen. I say, okay, Mom, let's make a deal, which is definitely something my 6-year-old would say to me over the same subject. I said, let's make a deal. You buy me this paperback book of True Lies. It was $4, like $3.99. We lived in Oregon, so no sales tax. You buy this for me. We go camping. We each read it. If you like it, you have to take me to go see the movie. And she actually agreed. She actually agreed to do it. I was surprised. Like, all right. So we go to camping. We both read it. We both freaking love it. And it's not just us that love it too, right? Critics loved it too. 70% Rotten Tomatoes. All right. It has an A cinema score. I heard stories when it was playing at the drive-in. When the opening night happened in 1995, my boss was there. And he was telling me that at the very end of that movie, they had a packed house because it opened up like right after 4th of July. So they had a packed house during the summer, 1,000 cars. And at the end of that movie, when the bad guy is on the missile and Harry is piloting the Harrier jet, and he just says, "You're fired." And he shoots the missile through the building into the other helicopter, taking out all the terrorists in one fell swoop. The audience cheered, applauded loudly. And I really wish I would have been there for that, because that would have been amazing to see. People love this damn movie, which is one of the it's so weird that we got a DVD release and I think like 2001, 2002, maybe. It was early they did it, right? The VHS came out in 1995. The Laserdisc came out a month later in early 95. Oh, we got the DVD May 25th, 1999. My bad. But then a high definition version was released in 2003. Then in 2018, I'm kind of going over this here. Cameron had said that there was a new transfer for the Blu-ray that had been completed, but he hasn't found the time to review it. This, of course, is him being balls deep in Avatar. And we finally got the 4K copy of the movie in March of this year. Now, you could have gotten a 1080p upres, and they would have had that on Stars back in the day. And then now it's on Hulu, where they had the high definition version. So, I mean, we couldn't have gotten it on Blu-ray for physical media, but it was completely available to watch and completely watchable on streaming. Although right now, Cameron apparently has gotten some flack for using AI to upscale the movie for 4K, and that I don't like. I mean, look, I'm a big AI fan, but I'm of two minds on that one. But I'll tell you who wasn't of two minds. The movie cost $100 million to make and grossed $379 million worldwide. Never mind what it would have sold on home video. What it would have done, Think about how much money it would have made if they would have actually released the damn thing on Blu-ray. But look, that's at this point, that is literally just like sour grapes. Okay. That is literally just sour grapes. But anyway, gang, that wraps up the first episode of Real Adventures, talking about 10 movies that I like, that I've seen when I was a kid. And the series will go through random movies through random years, maybe random decades. Each and every one will have a unique story for me if I can recall what it was like when I watched it. But I want to know what you guys think about these movies. Do you like them? Do you not like them? How do you like the format of the show? Let me know, because it's an evolving format. But this was a fun 40 minutes. And I hope you enjoyed it too. I'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you again. Have yourself a great day and peace out.